the news for the property box.
Yeah.
I actually just sort of keep that as a wee backup to see, because I just get most of my stuff from Property Wire, because
Yes.
ultimately it just scrapes all the different news articles, if it's from Rick's or wherever, and just take it from there.
There was some interesting stuff out actually today from the Nationwide and the Halifax report,
Right.
that yes, transactions and everything have gone off a cliff, but actually to the end of March, it was really, really strong. Okay, I think we're live in the group now, because I've got some people saying hi. So if anyone who's in the Asset Academy Advanced group, if we could get more than one hi, just so that Chris and I know that we are talking to more than one person, that would be absolutely brilliant. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Evening.
You've got myself, Arden Hanley, and my partner in crime, Mr. Chris Cormack here. We are the buy-to-let and property entrepreneurship trainers. We're with you this evening talking about kind of protecting your property income stream at the moment, and also any external income streams you have, and giving you some ideas about how you can kind of get through the next couple of months with the coronavirus crisis, but also some things that you can be doing now which will benefit your business for the long term. So Chris, do you want to say hello to everybody as well?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. For those who know us and have joined us on the buy-to-let and property ownership course, it's lovely to have you here. Thank you. For those who don't know us, my name's Chris Cormack. My background and why I'm here and why I'm one of the trainers, I came through the training back in 2004, so I've been around for a long time. I had hair in those days, but tell by the two of us, if you put your nose to the grindstone, you start losing your hair. But ultimately, and I'm a mentor as well. I mentor UK international students. I've been doing that since 2007. Thoroughly enjoy that, as well as doing the buy-to-let entrepreneurship course. I'm also one of the trainers for Momentum. So some of you might not know me from buy-to-let, but you might know me from Momentum. So it's great to be here tonight. I'm also one of the trainers and coaches for the sourcing course as well. So I do a whole lot. Thoroughly love doing these things, giving you all the education. But what about a bit of Arden's background, and then we'll get on with tonight's topics and wait for your questions to come in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I will have met a few of you who are watching tonight on the buy-to-let and property entrepreneurship course. So hello to all those people who've met myself and Chris before. For those of you who don't know me, I came through my training about 10 years ago. Predominantly, I buy buy-to-lets, HMOs, and small blocks of flats. That's really the core of my my strategy. I'm one of the trainers for the buy-to-let and property entrepreneurship course. I also do mentorships for Asset Academy's international students. And much like Chris, I'm also one of the coaches for the sourcing coaching program. And hopefully we've got a few people who've come through that recently. I've seen some of our students have been fairly active on the Facebook group, taking advantage of the time in lockdown to be able to put the finishing touches on their sourcing business, which sounds like a really good thing to do, to be protecting sort of multiple income streams at the moment. So where we wanted to kind of start this evening is start off with some of the property related things that you need to be thinking about at the moment, with lockdown in place, with some of the things that have come up in terms of rent payment holidays for tenants in properties, and some of the things that you need to think about as the landlord or owner of the property to begin with. And this really depends on how your portfolio is set up, maybe who your tenants are in the property at the moment, and it's worth getting this dialogue going with your lettings agent as quickly as possible, or if your lettings agent's not reacting, have these conversations with the tenants. So let's start off to begin with. You've got tenants in your properties. The first kind of issue you might have is, are you coming up against some of your tenants potentially in a position where they're having difficulty with payment? Now, the first thing on this is what the government has said is that they would like landlords as a group, as an industry, to be flexible with regards to payments for tenants. Now, they've talked about rent payment holidays. They've talked about these relationships or arrangements being in place for the next 3 months. But what they've actually said in the detail is that this doesn't mean that tenants should stop paying the rent. What this means is if the tenant does have difficulty in paying the rent, because maybe they're on reduced hours or they've lost a job or something like that, that us as landlords should be flexible in making a payment arrangement with them. So that's the first thing. One of the things, and I know a few people have kind of commented on this, I've done a video on this recently and put it up in the Facebook group as well, is looking at what's actually been published from the government. Yes, the headline was rent payment holidays, but that's not by default a payment holiday. That's if the tenant needs it to begin with. So what do you do as a professional landlord? Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to speak to my lettings team on the ground and say, you know, do I have any tenants who have issues in my properties, and understand what their problems are. Now, I'll speak for a moment from my personal experience. I've had to have 3 conversations with my lettings team at the moment. Across all of the tenants that I have, I've had to have 3 conversations, okay? They fall into these categories right now. Number 1, I've got a tenant in one of my buy-to-let properties. She is working in a job where she's not going to be furloughed because they need her to continue doing her work, but she is going to have significantly less hours over the next few weeks as a result, and probably over the next coming months because she's on reduced hours. She's waiting for a universal credit claim to go through. She also has 2 young children at home, and one of her children was showing symptoms of coronavirus, so they were asked to self-isolate as well. So you can imagine her situation there. She's going to have difficulty paying the rent. Now, spoke with the lettings agent, said, yes, we need to be flexible about this. What she agreed was she was maintain at least 50% of her rent for the short term. As soon as she gets a claim for universal credit in, she will top up her payments there. And as soon as her hours increase at work again and things return to normal, we'll make a longer term payment arrangement to recover. So that's kind of one scenario that I've had experience with. Another kind of situation that may come up is you may have your tenants in a position where they're being furloughed. Now, their employer, if they furlough them, may decide to pay them 100% of their salary. But we've got to remember the government is only paying 80% of salaries. And so therefore, when someone gets furloughed, they may see a drop in their income. Now, once again, similar situation in relation to this. This doesn't mean that there will be no payment whatsoever, but it might mean, and you think about it from your side, if you had a 20% drop in income, you might need to make some arrangements for what you could afford to pay now with a view to catching up later on. So just be aware that might be another situation there. Another one directly that I've had that related to me, I've actually got 2 that are very similar. One was an employee, one was self-employed. So an employee working in the building trade, the site that he was working on has been closed down. He's got to put in a universal credit claim. That means he won't be paying his rent in April, but when his claim goes through at the start of May, he will be paying his rent in full from that point onwards, and he will also be backdating any backdated payments he gets from Universal Credit. He'll be putting them towards that payment for April. Another one that I've had as well, and this is another scenario that can come up for you, people who are self-employed. Now, generally, people who are furloughed will know about that this month. People who are putting in universal credit claims, even though universal credit gets a pretty bad rap for processing times at the moment, they seem to be aiming for and getting through things in about 4 to 5 weeks, which, considering the amount of extra claims that have gone in, is reasonably good. The self-employed one is going to be an issue because that's going to come in as a lump sum. That's probably not going to come in until some point in May. They're still describing the scheme at the moment. In that situation, I've got a tenant who's a self-employed contractor. He's not going to be able to pay his rent this month. Understandable. He gets a payment holiday, but my lettings agents have made sure that he's very much aware that once he does get his lump sum from that self-employment grant, he does need to bring things up to kind of regular payments at that point there. So probably what I would say with this is the biggest issue for your portfolio where you've got tenants in place right now is not necessarily going to be no payment for the next 3 months. it's potentially going to be a delay in getting the payments while your tenants get access to some of the measures the government has put in. So just bear that in mind, and don't, sort of dig your feet in or, refuse to agree payment plans. Work in a collaborative way with the tenants. If you do have any tenants who are in receipt of housing benefit and they're not making the payments across to you, they've got no reason not to make the payments. The government have said that. You can put in a form to the local authority requesting direct payment of rent once that tenant is in arrears. If they're in receipt of universal credit and they're not paying you, there's a form that goes into universal credit itself. If you Google UC47 form, UC47 form, that's the name of the form. That's for direct payment of rent to the landlord. Just a comment here, actually, which is quite useful. I'll just flick that up. One of the people who's listening to this is saying they're running a lettings agency. All the tenants seem pretty switched on and don't want to fall behind. No one's making excuses. To be honest, the lettings agents I work with as well are saying a very similar thing. Even though there's been a lot in the media about payment holidays, the only people they've had to have conversations with are people who've got genuine problems where they've got reduced hours or they're waiting for claims to come through at the moment. So, I think everyone is kind of at the moment in the same boat. We're all trying to be in this together. And if we can keep everything on track, we're trying to. The only other thing I saw today, and this has been bubbling for a little while, is this idea that there's going to be a student strike on rent payments. And I know where this came from. You've got a couple of big student rental companies saying they're not going to release students who've had to go home because all of their university course has gone online because of social distancing measures. They're not going to release them from their contract to the end of the academic year. The justification, they say, is the student's still going to receive their student loans, so they should be able to pay out their contract. Now, me personally, I don't have a lot of students in my portfolio. I do have a few. I've accepted notice from any students that plan to go home to their families. I think that's only the right thing to do, is to kind of, allow them to serve notice. They've all agreed to pay out their notice period, but importantly for them, they're not paying an extra 2 or 3 months on top of that when they're not living in the property. And that also gives me the opportunity maybe to relet that property to somebody else during that time as well. So the other side of that is if you do have students who do want to stay in the property, and I've got this with a couple of students in my portfolio who are from overseas. Now, they've got tickets booked for later in the year, so they do need to stay put, and they're continuing the payments. And if you do have any students who need to stay put and they've still received their student grant, they should be in a position to pay. Okay, so that's the situation in relation to tenants. The last thing to kind of touch on is protecting your property income stream, things like refinances, anything you might have in play at the moment around product changes for your mortgages if you're going through a purchase at the moment. Now, sort of maybe going back about 2 weeks or so, up until about 3 or 4 days ago, lenders very much, the message was, we're prioritising all the staff that we've kept on to deal with people who have maybe got issues and they need to agree a payment arrangement or something like that. They're in a position where they can't pay. What I've seen myself personally, and I've seen it for a couple of other people over the last few days, is they're getting back to finishing off business that is already in progress. So if you have got maybe a refinance in progress or you've got a purchase in progress, the lenders are starting to get to that now. And the message from a couple of brokers that I deal with is, as long as there's not a requirement to maybe do a valuation in an occupied property, if it's the underwriter just going through your case, the valuation's already been conducted, if it's at the stage that it's going through legals, they are looking to get that business done at the moment and keep things ticking over slowly but surely. The other thing, if you've got a purchase and you do potentially want to delay that purchase a little bit, because it may be difficult to get a refurb team in at the moment to do things as effectively, there was an announcement today that mortgage lenders will be having some flexibility on extending the terms of offers to allow for any additional time that's needed for a purchase. Do negotiate with that. The other thing I would say on that finally is don't just assume that you should push back the purchase at this stage. And I'll just give you an example from what one of my builders is doing. They normally have a team of 5 of them that work together. So rather than them all being together on one site where they breach social distancing rules, they're actually sticking one team member on multiple different sites, so that way they're still working away, they're still continuing their activities, but they're not breaching into the social distancing rules. So before you definitely delay things or push things back, just do have a conversation with your refurb team and see if there's a way that they can continue their business while being safe and making sure that they're not breaking any of the rules at that point in time. I'm going to sort of pass over to Chris for a moment, because talking about what actually can happen in terms of your portfolio and getting tenants in at the moment too.
Things Adam was saying is just keeping up with the news and keeping ahead of what's happening. And with your tenants that are in your property, is communicating through your letting agent what's happening. For myself personally, in our own portfolio, we've had one tenant contact our letting agent saying that they're endeavouring to pay what they can, but at this time they're not quite sure how cash flow is going to go for them around work, etc. So, but they'll endeavour to pay what they can. So they've opened up a discussion already before they get into that awkward position, and it's just keeping those channels open. And as already mentioned, students, we've had one tenant leave, and that was a student in a one-bedroom flat. And of course, she didn't have to go into university any longer, and she lost her job because of the coronavirus. She was going home to her parents. And of course, we weren't going to hold her out to the remaining amount of our tenancy. There's about another 8 weeks to go on it. But we said, no, off you go, that's fine. Unfortunately, we didn't get it relet, but that's just the way it is. You got to go with the strikes. So what do you do with empty properties? Is it a case where you just got to sit and wait and hold on and just think, well, let's see when this happens? Because we've got no idea when we're coming out of this. I'm calling it hibernation, but it's not a time to be sitting on your hands and doing nothing, because there's lots of things you can be doing. And one of the things is around your empty properties, could you be looking for tenants to fill them now? And you can. When you actually look at what the position is, you are got the capability to go and fill them. So really the question is, what properties do you have around areas where are key workers? Have you got anything near hospitals, right? Are there doctors, nurses who are coming into the area? Because what we will probably start to see is we'll start to see some of the medical staff moving around the country. So where we've got London ahead of the rest of the country just now, as that starts to dwindle there and other hotspots come across the UK with the coronavirus, you'll find medical staff moving around. So it could be worth getting in touch with the accommodation officer at that local hospital, if they have one, to see, have they got need for accommodation? Have they got any key workers? And it might not be a doctor, it might not be a nurse. It could be a cleaner. It could be someone doing the food. It could be someone working in laundry. It's just making these contacts with that. And then, of course, what about the local authority? Have they got any vulnerable tenants that they're needed to get into housing, maybe around isolation? So they could be in an environment more like an HMO or a bed and breakfast or something like that, and potentially they need to be in their own environment, their own space, to keep them safe and protected from the potential contaminations with coronavirus if they're mixing with other people. Then, of course, what about essential workers, police, fire? Then we've got the people working in the shops, distribution centres, packing centres, food production centres. Have you got any industrial parks where these employers are? Do they need accommodation for themselves? Because we've all seen they're all scaling up with the workers. Amazon have got more delivery people, etc., etc. So if you've got properties around these distribution centres, don't just say, oh, I can't fill them. You can. All right, you can still put people into the properties if they need it, especially if it is got a common, if it's furnished. So if you've got rooms in HMOs that are furnished, then start communicating with these employers, with the local authorities, with the government-based services, and seeing if you can offer them the accommodation to them. And you might even find that potentially there could be somebody that is an essential worker, and they have someone in their house that is in a vulnerable position through illness or age, whatever it might be, and they might be looking to sort of be away from them. So with their work, there's no chance of contaminating that family member. So again, there's a number of different things we can look at here. We can either sit on our hands and moan and groan about it, or we could be entrepreneurial and start thinking outside the box and seeing if we can go and help. And it's an important thing to do, because at this time, everybody's needing that little bit extra help, especially those who are right on the front line. It's fine for me sitting here in the Scottish borders. I can jump over the back fence and take the dog for an hour and a half walk in the fields. So literally the chance of me bumping into someone with coronavirus is pretty slim. But I'm not living in the big city where people are. And if you've got the ability to offer your accommodation to these people, then great. And you know what? It might not even be at a cost. It might be something you just do from the goodness of your heart to help them out. Also, on the other side of that, there's a question today in the Asset Academy Facebook page. What about insurance? Well, if you've got someone in your property, that covers your insurance, doesn't it? So it helps with that as well. So there's a number of different things we can do here. Though my Aberdonian DNA does like to think I would get some rent for it, but ultimately I prefer to have someone in the comfort of the property, secure and safe and doing a job, or not putting any other family member at risk. All right, so please don't just sit there thinking, I've got an empty property, what can I do? Have a look around your area, and if you know your area, and if you know your area research, you'll know who the employers are in the area. Are they scaling up? Do they need accommodation? And approach them, because they're crying out for it in the marketplace. All right, okay.
We've got a question which has kind of come in, which is pretty kind of tied up with what Chris was just talking about there. One of you's just asked, we've got an empty buy-to-let near a hospital, however, it doesn't have any white goods. Would this be attractive to hospital staff? I'd probably say, from what I'm hearing at the moment, it's easier if this is furnished, because you think about what's probably happening at the moment is this is not people planning long-term moves. This is people moving on a bit of a needs-must basis. So having white goods, potentially having some basic furniture will probably make it more attractive. But what I would say to the person who asked that question, and we love to give a shout out to anyone who asks a question, but on our screen it just comes up with Facebook users. So if you do type as a question, put your name at the end of it so we know who we're talking to. That would be brilliant. I would have a conversation with the hospital and see if they've got some requirements, or even if you've got a lettings agent in the area that houses a lot of people for the hospital, make some inquiries, because if all they need is some basic white goods, well, that might be the type of thing, you know, one of the big things with the government saying no home moves was really about having the moving van there with a 2 or 3 man crew, and then having the family there and having all of that intermixing, and potentially a big kind of issue with complying with the social distancing rules. Whereas if you could get your buy-to-let into a position where it would be attractive, where it could house some of those essential workers at the moment, just by, you may be getting some white goods delivered that you can install yourself without anybody else being there, or you can have someone install for you without anybody else needing to be there. You're still within the rules, and you may be solving a problem of giving someone who needs it really good accommodation. Okay.
As Arden was saying there about one of the team that do the work for him, he's got his chaps across a number of different projects. They're not in the same vicinity. So going into an empty property and having white goods put in, as long as either you've got the services you can get access to yourself, or there is a supplier who can do it. And if it's coming like for the hospital, it's the accommodation officer at the hospital making a phone call to somebody, they'll bend over backwards to get some white goods into that property, because again, it's this, we need to be helping everyone as best we can at this critical time.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question that came up here, a lot of sales will fall through as amateur landlords get scared. They also might fall through as, people just moving home, get a little bit scared and panicked at the time. Is now the time to go back and renegotiate? Possibly it is. Now, I'm in two minds about this. Just before we came on live, Chris and I were talking about some of the information that's been published today around house prices and things like that. And there was a great way of putting this in that was in the nationwide housing report. Everyone is concerned there may be a drop in prices because of an economic wobble. But the thing is, the market was really strong up until the point that this came into play. And also what's happened at the moment is everything stopped. So until things start to move again, we won't really be able to assess. But I do have it in the back of my mind that, if someone's withdrawn from a transaction because they're nervous, because they're assuming the sky is falling, I'm seeing that as an opportunity, because I think in reality, the supply and demand factors haven't changed in the UK property market. There's still lots of tenants chasing properties. there's still more buyers. If we talk about that kind of first-time buyer market or upsizer market, the people who might buy our flips when we do them, there's more buyers registered than there are properties for sale. So that, kind of, puts us in a position where coming out of this, I think there are going to be some great opportunities. And if there's a little bit of a price dip, like Knight Frank and Savills are kind of predicting there will be a little bit of a price dip, I think it'll be short-lived because there's so much government support to underpin what's going on in the economy at the moment.
And it's very different to where it was in 2008 when it was a financial crash. It was the banks. The money's still in the market now, all right, and there's more coming into the marketplace with the quantitative easing that's going on in the central banks. So there will be, there's a bit, as Arden says, the growth starting to build up the end of February. Month to month, it was great and greater and greater, but they've just put a wee cap in that because of the coronavirus. So you're going to have the frustrated sellers, and that's where the drop might be. It's those who want to sell because they've had to wait this time scale, however long that is, and then they've got, I just need to drop the price to get it off. Going back to your question, should you be going back to reinforce your offer? Potentially, yes, but I wouldn't be going back and putting in a lower offer because that might just be seen as you be taking advantage of the marketplace, especially when we don't know how long this is going on. So I would wait probably, I don't know, another 2 to 3 weeks and wait to see. But if I'm going back to say, look, just to let you know, as things are starting to move forward, it seems to get to the end of this, I'm still in the marketplace, that offer I mentioned, right? Don't be seen to be trying to take advantage of putting in a lower offer now because estate agents won't accept that, all right? They'll be probably pretty hacked off because we are definitely going into a new era within the country and how we look at things. I think we're going to find a very different country at the end of this and getting more to people be more supportive of each other. So we just have to be a bit more tactful and sensitive potentially to how we actually communicate what we're looking to do.
Now, just before I move on to talking a little bit about what happens if you as a landlord or a property owner needs a payment plan, there's a question just come in. If we found short-term tenants for our property less than 6 months, what kind of letting agreement do we need in place? You can agree for England, and I'll defer to Chris for Scotland in a moment. For England and Wales, you can sign an AST for less than 6 months. The main kind of issue with that is around possession rules, that you can't serve a Section 21 notice in England and Wales until month 4. So by default, you're giving them 6 months. But if, for example, you decided that, you're happy to do a short let agreement, say for 2 or 3 months, that's all the person who's moving in wants, you can sign just a standard AST to do that. The other option you have is you take something like a holiday let agreement and do it if it's a really short term. But actually what I'd say, if it was a month or two, sign a standard AST is probably the easiest way of doing things. With PRTs in Scotland, anything different, Chris?
No, because a PRT doesn't have that 6 month security of tenancy like your ASTs do down in England and Wales. So ultimately, it doesn't make any difference if you do it. But ultimately, what's the concern about that? Because if they come in and it's a short term and they enjoy staying there and actually it goes over that 6 months, you've got a long-term tenant, haven't you? So really, it's not going to be, it shouldn't be that big an issue. And if they are there short term and they want to move back to their home or move back to the area where they came from, they'll take off. All right. So again, it's just where we are in the marketplace, and I don't think that'd be too big an issue. I might have to eat my words in a couple of months' time. I'll wait and see if you come back and shove an AST down my throat. But I wouldn't be too concerned. All right. If you, especially this time, trying to tie people into heavy contracts and stuff. If someone needs it short term, give them an AST. As Arden's explained, you get an out clause. In Scotland, we don't have that fixed term period. So, if they do stay and they don't pay the rent, let's say after coronavirus has disappeared, I can just give them the letter to leave. So it's not an issue in Scotland either.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a comment here from that I just want to pick up on before we move on to the next section as well. One of the people watching has contacted the Hospital Council and charities. And unfortunately, they're not offering short-term contracts, which doesn't really work for Alka, which is absolutely fine. If that doesn't work for you, Alka, you don't have to take them. But the interesting thing there is some of those providers are offering long-term contracts at the moment, minimum 3 years. Now, I just mentioned that because that may not be right for you, Alka, in your portfolio, but I thought I'd flag that up because from some of these conversations, this might flag up other opportunities, because there are some people who deliberately go out there looking for those longer term contracts. So this might be a time to open that conversation at the moment. But do appreciate your comment, Alka, that it's maybe not what you're looking for right now, but that could be something that's very interesting to somebody else.
And I've been mulling this over. We've had a few conversations, but I spoke to a few other people about it. I think people are going to start reviewing who their tenants are in a database. I think, within their portfolio, and they're going to start looking to see, right, when coronavirus came, what was my tenant mix? Now, I know there's a lot of Asset Academy students who aren't big on benefit tenants. Ros and I, in our portfolio, we've got stacks. I've got no problem with it at all. Ultimately, the government's going to pay first, all right? The ones who are in the job, as that student was, for example, she probably stayed in the flat as she kept her job, but because she lost her job as well and was not able to go to university, she went back to her parents. Now, that's where the exposure is. So potentially, people might start looking at their demographic across their portfolio and think, do you know what? Maybe I do need a different mix. It's not just people who are in the JOB with that high-profile company, if it's Amazon or whoever it's going to be. So it's something I think is going to come into the marketplace, and people are going to start scratching their heads and thinking about who they're going to have. I think referencing might take a different position on that, and just looking to see who's around. Because, I'm sorry, this is going to happen again. All right, just because when we're released from the properties, when we're allowed to leave our caves out of hibernation, we're all going to be very, very tentative. But what is going to happen on the back of that is a different view on how things happen and how things go. So we need to take that on board and just start to think, will this change some of the profiling within our tenant base that we're looking at and that we're considering? And I think it is. All right. As well as you want a mix of different property types and different locations in your portfolio, you also want to have a different tenant type within your portfolio. And I'll tell you, if I'm getting offered a 3-year fixed contract guaranteed rent, are they going to default on their mortgages in this time? Because I said it's going to come back. Because if we don't clear it now and people stay at home, whenever we start getting back out into society, it's still lingering. This could just kick back in. We've got to keep an eye on these countries like the Chinas who are now starting to come out of their hibernation. How big does it kick back, right? Because just because we're allowed back out, it doesn't mean it's gone. It's still within society. It's still clinging around the place. So it's just something you may want to consider in your portfolio as you're building it. Your demographic tenant and mixing your property types and the tenant base around that. Sorry, are we soapbox moment there?
No. I quite approve of your soapbox there, because I'm in a similar view. I mean, I always have kept some of my portfolio in social housing, and actually, once news started coming out about this, I'm really glad that I did, because they're probably the most secure tenants at this point in time. I definitely don't think it's an area that I would shy away from at the moment. Moving from kind of the tenant side of things, if you are in a position where maybe a tenant's not paying or struggling to pay, and you need to start looking at reducing your outgoings and having conversations with lenders. So fairly well publicized, you can go to buy-to-let mortgage lenders. The majority of them I have kind of come forward and say they will allow self-certification around any payment holidays and things like that. Best practice is do get some evidence directly from the tenant yourself, or get the lettings agent to collect that, just in case you need to justify that at any point in time why you've asked for that payment holiday. You may have seen as well, this has been out there for a couple of days now, the FCA has also gone to lenders as well and said that they should be offering 3-month payment holidays on credit cards, on personal loans as well. So that might be something that you need to look at if you are struggling. And they've not said anything about sort of payment holidays or extension to overdrafts. What they have gone through is they have said that they want waivers of fees at the moment for overdrafts and for things like missed payments. Although what I would say is, if you do need to make an arrangement with the lender, get in contact with them before that payment bounces, because it's going to be a much easier conversation. If the payment bounces, the situation at the moment is pretty much everybody has said this won't affect credit files long term. But the proviso of that is that you've actually had the conversation, you've agreed something with a lender. If you've bounced a whole bunch of direct debits that possibly could have an issue with your credit file later on. So approach this professionally, have the conversation, kind of protect yourself and use it when you need it. Because remember as well, the same way that we're saying tenants should keep on paying the rent if they can afford it so they don't build up a big problem later on, it's the same thing for us as landlords as well. If we defer a whole bunch of mortgage payments today, we're just building up a big issue that we're going to have larger payments and a bigger debt to deal with later on as well. Okay, so just be, you know, kind of aware of that. Now, I'm just going to deal with a couple of questions before we move into Chris talking about some external income streams as well. Peter's just put a question there about would I be in breach of mortgage terms if I don't give a normal AST? You would need to check your terms of the mortgage. Now, some mortgage lenders will allow an AST or will allow a maybe a license agreement is used for some HMO style accommodation in England and Wales as well. I think your reasoning behind not giving an AST is you're going to give it to key workers almost on a bit of a gift basis that they contribute something towards their bills. What I would say, Peter, is to be in compliance with your mortgage terms. If you want to do that to kind of support people at this time, that's absolutely fine. Rather than making it no contract in place, no AST, because that doesn't protect you. It also doesn't protect your tenants as well. And even more than mortgage lenders, I'm thinking about insurance and things like that. Why don't you grant a tenancy on a very low rent? Because there's no requirement there when you put together an AST that you must charge a commercial rent. You could write up an AST, decide to support people, and maybe only charge them 50% or 25% of what the normal rent is, but still have a valid agreement in place that that protects everybody. I think that would be the best way of handling it. Now, there's another comment there. We've had a situation where one of the landlords has had a charity organisation give notice on a house where there are 4 rooms. I suppose that's the other side of things as well. There are probably going to be some housing charities. There may be some kind of rent-to-rent and guaranteed rent providers at the moment that the type of people they're housing are not in a position to pay right now, and they may have to give notice. And this is not really a right or wrong. This is the reality of what we live in. If that happens, you need to react quickly and look at replacing with another income stream that will kind of, you know, that a tenant type that needs that property at the moment. So, you know, don't assume because one charity has had to serve notice that all charities will serve notice. Don't assume because maybe one local authority has served notice on a contract that that's the rule everywhere. This is kind of, we're operating in a bit of a needs must type situation at the moment where people still need somewhere to live. They just might not all need to be in the same position, and some people are very well supported at the moment. Some people, it's going to take a little bit of time for that support to come through. Okay, so just be aware of that.
Well, it depends where the charity's getting their funds from. If it's self-funded, and we also yesterday in the news that the charities are struggling massively because all the events, the London Marathon, etc. When someone was on yesterday, I'm sure they said just they lost 55 million raising just from the London Marathon. You know, so again, where they're getting the money from? There are charities that have got the links and they're getting the money from the benefit system. Then they are still getting paid because that's coming straight from the government. So it won't be all charities. There will be definitely some who've got the smaller pockets, unfortunately, at this time, because they're supporting the most vulnerable, the ones who really need it at this time.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Chris, you were going to mention some things around kind of other income streams, property-related income streams that might be applicable to some of the people watching tonight to just protect those businesses or potentially grow them at this point in time as well.
Well, I mean, those who've had the fortunate pleasure of being with us on the Buy-to-Let and Property Entrepreneurship course, they know we talk about service income and the importance of creating income as well as building your portfolio cash flow for the benefits that rate brings to you for getting finance further down the road. And this is a time where you can really start to sit and think about what can you do. So, for example, within your job, what you do away from property, what is that skill set? Is it something that you can monetize now? Now, the phrase they use on the internet is a side hustle. Now, A little side hustle could be, if you're a graphic designer, could you be doing something on Fiverr and doing graphic design? Could you be doing, you've got an ability around PowerPoint, could you be doing PowerPoint setups for people? There's a lot of things. If you're bookkeeping, you could be offering your bookkeeping services. There's a whole lot of outsourcing websites out there, Upworks, Fiverr, there's a whole bunch of them. So think about, could you be doing that? Some people might want an ebook written. Could you be the person, if you've got a skill set with words? Definitely not my forte. So again, you have a think about that. Could you be putting something in place now that could generate 100, 200, 300 pounds a month from doing some part-time work using the skill set you already have? And a lot of people don't think about that they could do. So again, it could be an architectural service, an interior design service. You could be offering that on one of those sites and you can make money from it. Then, of course, where we look at loss centers within our portfolio, could we turn those into profit centers? So we're creating more income from a profit. Now, some of these we do need scales, but just now, something like a letting agent, could you be using your time to actually start and put structures in place to create a letting agent? So you could actually start managing your own, and then you can start bringing other landlords. If you get the right infrastructure in place, you can actually put some effort at the beginning and then step back from it, and it just starts to tick along nicely on its own when you've got the structures and the processes in place. Especially, again, with outsourcing, most letting agents today, they outsource most of their activity. They don't do very much themselves if it comes to the references or the insurances, whatever it is. It's all outsourced to other people. So we can look to do that. Then what about furniture rentals? Have you got HMOs? Have you got properties maybe in your area? There are some buy-to-lets need some basic furniture. Could you then look to do that? Could you start looking at that? Or if you've got a skill set at maintenance, if you're in the trades, could you actually be thinking, do you know what? Maybe it's now time I actually start doing maintenance for other landlords, and I get a team of guys around me, a team of people around me, the guys and girls who are out there doing the work, and I get the contract and I subcontract out to these people, and then you can charge for that. Also, with that same business structure, you can charge for doing your own maintenance and refurbs on your property, so you're cross funding that. So again, there's a number of different things you want to be sitting looking about. And what else can we do? This is a time to get ready. Arden mentioned that little bit there about the rents and the costs and paying mortgages. Well, this is the time you want to be doing your financial detox. Where are you today? When last did you sit and work out your family figures of what you're spending? And then what's going on in your portfolio? Where's all that money being spent? Are you paying 2 lots of insurance? Are you paying the letting agent insurance for non-payment of rent and rent protection, and the malicious damage? It's probably already in your landlord's portfolio insurance. Have you read it? This is the time to sit down. Yeah, it's boring as hell to read it, with a drink and go and read it in peace and quiet and get caught up on exactly what you're paying for. Start looking at these costs. But what else could we do to generate income? Well, a great way is to go and get ready for when we do go out to the marketplace. We know there's going to be major opportunities for us to help people, is to actually go find deals for yourself, but find deals for other people. Start considering a sourcing business, all right? Is this the time that you actually go and put some action into place so you're ready to really monetize that market? Because you're going to be helping people create income when they need it through properties you source onto them. Also, it's building your capital pot. If you're getting 2.5, 3 grand plus for a deal, and you do it correctly, you'll easily get that again and again to your client base, then you're going to build a really nice side income, this recurring income that allows you to go and get further finance down the road, because again, this can be an issue, and we're sort of been having these discussions. Really, something else we're doing at this time around that, because people saying to us, "Oh, we're just stuck. How do we move forward?" And some is going to be because they haven't got the right revenue centers to get the further finance to get that portfolio to the next step. So these are things you want to be thinking about doing with that. And as I said, sourcing is definitely you want to consider. I mean, you all look at Asset Academy. You've all been following the pictures of Flora traveling through South America, and she's going to be doing deals. What's she doing? She's sourcing. That's what she's doing, but she's got the systems and processes in the right place and the right structures that her business is still working with her, all right? But she's enjoying the Caribbean and South America because she followed a process that was put in front of her and she took the right steps. Do you know anyone that does that?
See, that's one of the key things there. At the moment, when we're in this kind of lockdown mode, it's thinking about things that you can do remotely and maybe adapting your business as well. And that's a perfect example, Chris just mentioned there, of someone who's running a sourcing business from pretty much anywhere in the world with systems and processes, even before the coronavirus thing came into place. And this is a really big wake-up call for a lot of us to go, hang on, there are a whole bunch of things that I'm doing maybe out of laziness or because I haven't thought about it, that I could automate a little bit more, or I could make use of technology and online tools a little bit more. That leads me on to, kind of networking and things like that, expanding your network, connecting with potential angels, clients for your sourcing business, maybe someone who can source property to you, maybe looking at meeting new lettings agents and things like that. At the moment, where is everybody right now in a networking sense? We can't go out and do the face-to-face meetings we were doing before. So everyone's on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and things like that. So can you be making connections at the moment in that virtual world? Can you be showing off your skills that you have in property? Can you be showing off some of your great deals to attract investors to you? Could you be going on to a property networking group and offering advice to someone who's a bit newer there so that you get seen as an expert and someone who's credible so that people start engaging with you? Could you be hunting around for additional members to put into your power team? While it's kind of frustrating for a lot of us that we're stuck inside and everything does have to be, kind of Zoom meetings or phone calls, it also means that a lot of us are finding there's a little bit more free time because you're not driving to and from appointments and getting caught up in conversations and things like that. So now is a really good time to capitalize on those things, a little bit. Embrace kind of social media as a way of networking, growing your network and making some connections at the moment. And also look at where you can use technology a little bit more to make your business work better now, but make your business work better for the future as well. And for some people, this might be kind of, a little bit new. This might force you to think outside the box and things like that. You might have seen from Asset Academy, they've launched a kind of coaching thing just in the last week. That might be something that's really useful for you to get involved in at the moment. AA Teams Coaching, if you want some support in adapting your work practices, what you're doing with your portfolio at the moment, you've got that backup there. To kind of help you at this point in time. If you do need a little bit of an extra kick along, that might be something that's good for you at the moment. So that kind of, is kind of ends most of the formal stuff that we wanted to do as conversation starters. We're going to open it up for a bit more of a general kind of Q&A at the moment. I'm going to scroll through the box and just see if I kind of missed any questions earlier as we were scanning through. There are a few comments there on council tax. I know there's been a petition to kind of get councils to waive council tax or give payment holidays on council tax as well. I think a few are saying they'll defer payments. I've not found anybody yet saying that they will waive payments entirely. But given that they've waived some business rates and things like that, it would be very welcome, especially if properties are empty because of difficulties with getting home moves and things like that done. Questions come in here. How many different income streams do you guys have? I've got a few different income streams. I've got, obviously my property portfolio, and I've got different strands to the property portfolio. I've got my private tenants, I've got social housing tenants, and I've got those spread across a couple of different areas, which gives me some stability there. I also do, kind of training and coaching and consultation, which is another income stream for me. I own part of a lettings business. I used to have sourcing as an income stream. So I've got my fingers in a few different pies. I've got sort of, 4 or 5 kind of active income streams at the moment, which means that if one of those starts going a little bit soft, I've got other ones there in place. Do you want to weigh in a little bit on some of the external income streams as well, Chris?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot out there. Personally, I've got 4. I'm in the process of putting a 5th into place now. Again, some of them property related and some of them non-property related. But for them, I focused on the other ones once my portfolio got to where I wanted to be, so I could slightly slow down on that, even though I still build it and still very heavily involved in property. But then I started looking at other income streams. And actually where we are today with the situation, it's made me think a bit more. And that's why I'm looking to create a fifth now, to go and create that in the marketplace. Because again, it's just having these mixes, because we just don't know what's going to happen. There we are enjoying Christmas dinner just not that long ago, and we're sort of seeing what's happening in China, and we all thought, that'll never touch us. But as January started to kick on, and you start saying, wait a minute, this is spreading. It's just totally out of our control, and that's where you have to have those alternative income streams wherever they are, whatever source it is. If it's something on the internet or something more physical than that, whatever it may be, you just have to be looking around and thinking about it. And as I said, it could be a skill set you have already. There was a couple in the last buy-to-let last year, and they were sort of struggling to generate some income because they're quite new to the country. I was just asking what they did. And before the end of that discussion, they had 3 other potential income streams just from the skill sets they had between them. Because one of them wasn't focusing on what she did before in her home country. So I said, well, that's what you want to monetize. Go and monetize that now. You can do it very quickly. You've got the skill set. Just get some social media out there and go and build it. So everyone has got a skill set. They've just got to realize they've got it and then ask themselves, how can I monetize this? And if you get onto some of these sites, outsourcing sites, and there's many of them, you can start to see ways that you can make your money go further. Because most of the people on these sites, they've got full-time jobs. It might not be their sole income. Some of them it is, but not all of them. So, you just got to go and look and just think outside the box. Stop thinking inside that standard paradigm. Go and look differently at things and ask yourself, what can I go and do? Right, where can I go and promote my wares? All right.
Absolutely. Just before I get to this next question that's come up as a kind of follow-on or an introduction to answering this question, Chris kind of touched on this a little bit before. He was saying that he's built quite a few of the income streams after he'd built his property portfolio as the base. And I took a very similar approach. One of the things I would say, as you're starting to look at different income streams, is the way we learn how to do property in this environment, in the Asset Academy group, is we learn to treat it like a business. Yeah. And once you bring that business mindset to doing anything, you can apply that to lots of different income streams. You can do it. And we're talking about kind of maybe monetizing your skills, creating a bit of a side hustle, but you want to approach it as a business rather than thinking of it as creating a job. And that kind of leads nicely into how do you balance between lots of income streams and focus on the course until successful? Well, I would say I want, for the long term, lots of different income streams, lots of fingers in different pies, because that means that if one's performing not quite so well and another one's performing strongly, I build some resilience into my overall business. But I've got to be careful, because if I try and do 10 different things at once that are not related to each other, I'm going to be a jack of all trades, master of none. I'm not going to get anywhere with any of them. Do you want to kind of weigh in with some thoughts on that as well, Chris?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. I mean, we see and hear it all the time. I'm doing property, I'm starting to trade this market, trade that market. I'm writing a book to sell it on Amazon. I'm starting a web-based business, whatever it is. And ultimately, I'll just say, you're not going to be successful at anything, because you've got to give something some total focus. And even a total focus on property can be distracting, because there's so many options within property under that banner of property, what you can look to do. So there's distractions within that. And that's where you need to know what you're looking to achieve by going back to the basics of what your strategy is and what your outcomes you're looking for, what property types, and just focus on it like that blinkered racehorse and just do it and just do it and just do it. And then as you start to build that, you can then start looking at other things. But ideally, the easiest way to have multiple income streams is by having other businesses that spin off the side of property. So where they are that loss center, turn them into a profit center. It makes you more profitable. You're in that, all right? So you're looking for those cross synergies, because a lot of people, there's, one of the Kiyosaki books talks about, once you get your property portfolio, then go and buy a laundrette. And I've mentored students going, right, once I get my portfolio, I'm off to buy a laundrette. And I never went back to check the page in the Kiyosaki book it mentioned it in, but it's like, well, why? Because ultimately that is such a big distance away from property running a laundrette. It's a complete chalk and cheese. Why don't you have something around property that is related and there's the cross synergies with it, which then is easier to move into. You can just naturally build into it. So do look for these things that can be spun off from property, but it's actually allocating your time to make sure that you focus to get one up, and then at a certain time you start to bring it in. I did do some trading on the markets, but again, I didn't have the time to do that because of what I was doing with the property. All right, so I thought, well, I could watch the forex markets while I'm doing some property stuff on the screen. After a month and a half, I realized absolutely no way for me to learn to trade the forex market. I have to sit in front of that screen and concentrate it for 12, 16 hours a day until I got my eye in to understand what the charts were doing. So again, it's just being realistic about the time you have, your commitments, allocating the right time and focusing on one before you step up. But where we are just now, if there's downtime, this is where you got to start thinking about it. This is where your focus wants to be, how do I let the world know I'm looking for properties? And Arden spoke about social media, your LinkedIn, your Facebook page. You want to be out there just talking about looking for properties, all right? So that people will come back to you, oh, actually, I'm thinking of selling my property, but obviously I put it on hold because of the situation. You can go back, great, let's have a chat. Now you can have that chat now. It's laying the seeds so they're ready to germinate when we're allowed to get out the rabbit hole back into the big world. You can start taking the action. The ones who sit and wait to say, right now you can leave your house, right now I'll get started, they're going to be way behind the curve. The ones who get organized now, they're the ones who are going to run out and just crack on with this because they've been smart with their time. They're not just sitting watching box sets after box sets after box sets, whatever it is. The one just everyone's watching that Lion King or something. What's it all about? No idea. Anyway, it's how you spend your time. As you can tell, I don't watch much television. So it's getting ready for when we're allowed to get the house. And the ones who are prepped, ready, got their focus back, and they've got contacts to go and see whenever they can leave the front door, they're the ones who've got an opportunity to be the real successful solution providers.
Absolutely. Right. I think probably last question, because I think we were told to do about half an hour, 40 minutes. And true to form, it's like when you turn up on the buy to let and property entrepreneurship course, we're running late like we normally do. The question is, do you think the current situation has emphasized the need for diversity within your portfolio? I mean, certainly for me, I mentioned earlier, I'm very, very glad that I've got kind of social housing in my portfolio, that I've got tenants from different types, that I'm not all in students or all in young professionals. I've got some blue collar workers. I've got, some tenants on benefits. I've got families. I've got a mix. And I think that's really, really important, not just at the moment, but also for the long term. But it's times like these, I think, when you're really reminded of that, and you look at the people who have the most difficulty paying at the moment, or the areas of your portfolio that are most exposed. It's kind of, I think there will be some people who struggle at the moment as landlords and tenants, and they're probably those higher value properties, maybe the higher end properties and things like that, because whenever there's something like this, people do economize. And so making sure that you've got some diversity in your portfolio, so that even if you are chasing kind of top dollar with some of your high-end stock, making sure you've also got a base of some of the cheap and cheerful as well, good value, clean accommodation that's available at a reasonable price point will just give you lots of, protection in any market.
It's like any business. If you think Coca-Cola, do they just sell fizzy drinks? No, they don't. They sell water, they sell coffee. Unilever, do they just sell washing powder? No, they don't. They do creams, potions, lotions, and everything. And we're no different in property. Yes, when you start, you focus on the area, you farm that area, find those deals to get the momentum, start things moving. Then you've got to diversify. You can diversify from your buy-to-lets to your HMOs, etc. But different locations, different places, different properties, not just flats. You're going to have houses, semi-detached, terrace properties, whatever they're going to be. You need that mix. Because all what I've seen over the years is the landlords are just focused on one street. I remember doing a mentorship down in Exeter years ago, and a couple of landlords have focused on a couple of streets near the university. Well, in Exeter, they started doing all the purpose-built HMOs. Those guys' businesses just got devastated. It was just chaos. And you just stand and look at that, and that just doesn't make sense. And we're exactly the same here. You know, I think the people who are hurting now, big time, who've got most chance are those who are in serviced accommodation. Now, that's why you need a mix in your portfolio. You don't want a whole portfolio stuffed full of serviced accommodation, because just now, who on earth is using that accommodation? Now, ultimately, you could link it with some of those requirements of key workers and stuff like that. So I just think, again, we're going to see a change here. I think a lot of people will get out of serviced accommodation because they're going to be stung so hard. And I think the filling that is going to come quite a way down the road, because even if we are allowed out end of June, say, it might even be middle of July, are we all going to go away? I think everyone's going to be very cautious where they go and what they do. They're not going to suddenly jump on a plane and go off to holiday to America or Italy or France or whatever. And they might not even go for a holiday in the UK. They might say, do you know what? Let's just stay here, because we've had the fear of God being put into us, quite rightly so, with this little critter coronavirus. So it's a case of that part of the market might take a long time. So ultimately, you need to have a mix long-term in your portfolio. Tenant types, property styles, and location. All right, and that's what having a good, successful cash flow portfolio, because that then it lets you survive all the nuances of an economy, the peaks and troughs, the micro economy in certain areas. That if your portfolio is just in one area, you're out the game. But if you've got it mixed, then the survival rate is there, and as long as it's structured correctly and you follow all the processes we teach in that phenomenally good course, Buy to Let and Property Entrepreneurship. So if you haven't been, all right, we'll see you soon.
We absolutely will. We better jump off because I've got to go and join the clap for the NHS, as all of us should, on this Thursday evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Okay. Thanks very much. Okay.
Guys. Bye. Take care. Keep
a couple of your families. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.